Welcome to the Minnesota Rovers Tuesday evening presentation. Minnesota Rovers is an outdoors club based in Minneapolis, St. Paul. Our members organize trips that range from 1 hour to 2 weeks in Minnesota or further afield. Examples of our activities include hiking, biking, backpacking, skiing, snowshoeing, paddling, and rock climbing. We also organize conservation and trail clearing trips. Our members have experience and skills in many outdoor activities, so if you want to learn a new outdoor activity, we can probably help you. For more information, go to mnrovers.org. Now let's move on to this week's presentation.
Tonight, you're here to hear from Matt Davis and Derrick Passy as they talk about what's happening on the North Country Trail in Minnesota and Wisconsin. Matthew Davis has worked as the North Country Trail Association's North Dakota, Minnesota, Wisconsin Regional Trail Coordinator since 2006. He lives in Detroit Lakes, Minnesota, with his wife Stacy, who he met hiking the Appalachian Trail way back in 1998. Derrick Passy is a North Country Trail Association board member representing Minnesota and lives in Mound, Minnesota. He has been active with the Sakakawea Trail Club chapter since the 1990s. Please welcome tonight's speakers, Matt Davis and Derrick Passy.
Well, yeah, thanks for joining. Thanks for your interest in learning more about the North Country Trail. Derrick and I are going to go through some slides, and we'll have plenty of time for questions and answers at the end, or hopefully we'll have answers. We're going to start off with a trivia question. Who can tell me where that picture is taken from? It's on the North Country Trail somewhere. Any guesses? All right, so that is Agamock Bridge on the Sakakawea Trail in the Boundary Waters. So when the fires happened, the Forest Service had crews dedicated to set up sprinklers. They didn't want that bridge to burn because they would never be able to rebuild it since it's in the wilderness. So a very critical section of the Sakakawea / North Country Trail. So here's what we're going to talk about. We're just going to provide some background on the trail, talk a little bit more about the trail here in Minnesota and Wisconsin, which is the closest to the Twin Cities. And then we'll finish up with some questions from you all. So just to start with the basics, you can see the map there. It's a very long trail. It's about 4,800 miles, although we probably need to start saying that it's 5,000 miles because the last few people that have hiked the whole thing, they've logged about 1,000 or 5,000 miles on their hike. Goes from the Missouri River in North Dakota to the Appalachian Trail in Vermont. And that first point is it kind of gets at the exclusive company that we keep. There's only 11 national scenic trails that have been designated by Congress since the National Trail System Act was passed in 1968. It took 12 years for our trail to be designated by Congress, and that's really what it takes. National scenic trails and national historic trails can only be designated by Congress. So it's kind of like the cream of the crop for hiking trails in the United States. And there's actually two trails that are undergoing a feasibility study as we speak. One is the Buckeye Trail, which is actually already part of the North Country National Scenic Trail in Ohio. And then there's another one called the Long Trail in Alaska, which I didn't even know about until last week. So it is a lengthy process. Legislation has to be introduced calling for a federal agency to do a feasibility study, and then it actually takes an act of Congress and a signature by the president for a new national scenic trail or national historic trail to be designated. When that trail is designated, Congress kind of hands off responsibility to one of the four federal land management agencies. In our case, the National Park Service is the administering agency, which is really interesting because the biggest landowner on the whole North Country National Scenic Trail is actually the U.S. Forest Service. They've got about 700 miles of the trail in all of the 8 states that go through national forests or the one national grassland in North Dakota. And that actually plays into the history of the North Country Trail. We don't know, we don't think there was ever a moment where somebody climbed a tree or climbed a mountain and said, hey, wouldn't it be cool to have a hiking trail from North Dakota to Vermont? Instead, we think the U.S. Forest Service said, hey, wouldn't it be cool if we had a trail that linked together all of our national forests across the northern tier of the United States? That story is probably sitting in a box in the government records administration somewhere in Washington, and we've not been able to find it yet. We're instead focusing on trying to finish the trail. So of the 4,800 miles, we've got about 3,300 that are on the ground and hikeable. So if you do the math, that's about 1,500 miles that are still located on roads, where we have off-road sections of trail. We'll link them together with a road walk, which is not anybody's favorite way to hike, but it's a way for us to kind of connect these sections and provide a long distance hiking experience, which, believe it or not, there are people who do set out to hike long distances on the North Country Trail. I think we're just a little bit over 20 people that have through hiked the whole trail. And it's an endeavor. If you start at one end and hike to the other, you have to pick, do I want to start and experience winter in North Dakota or in the Adirondacks and Green Mountains in New York and Vermont? And really, there's no right answer to that, because winter can kind of linger deep into spring, and you're going to be trudging through snow. Some smart people actually have started down here, if you see my cursor, down in southwestern Ohio by Cincinnati, and hiked to one direction and then flip-flopped and then hiked back to Cincinnati, because it's a little bit easier to hike in Cincinnati in the winter than it is at either end. That last point is really why we're here. The trail, even though it's administered by the National Park Service, it's built, maintained, promoted, and protected by volunteers, folks like Derrick, who said, hey, this trail is a neat idea. I'm going to lend my volunteer skills. I'm going to roll up my sleeves, and I'm going to help make this trail a reality in my local community. So those volunteers are affiliated with the nonprofit North Country Trail Association. That's who I work with, or through our chapters. We've got 30 chapters across the whole trail. And we also partner with affiliate partner organizations like the Border Route Trail Association, who, I think Pam and some other folks from the BRTA are here on the meeting tonight. So rather than duplicating the effort of those existing groups, we just kind of say, hey, we'll work to support you. We'll work with you. The National Park Service can provide some of the tools and equipment and training that they provide to our chapters. And it's really a great way to be efficient. And one of the cool things about the North Country Trail is because of its route, it actually affiliate partners play a significant role. Most of the trail in Ohio is the North Country Trail kind of lays on top of the Buckeye Trail. And in New York State, I think about half of the trail follows the Finger Lakes Trail, which are much older than the North Country Trail. And then here in Minnesota, we have two affiliate partners, the Border Route Trail Association, and we also follow the Superior Hiking Trail. And if you want to learn more about the trail, you can just visit our website, and there's a tab for Explore the Trail, and you can zoom in on particular sections and see some detailed maps. But let's jump and look at Wisconsin first. Wisconsin, before we added Vermont back in 2019, used to be the smallest state in terms of the mileage, but now Vermont is about 70 miles. So Wisconsin's 220 miles actually, looks big now compared to Vermont. But it just clips the four northern counties. And in that 220 miles, Wisconsin's kind of, it's got kind of the two extremes. We've got long road walks and we've got long completed segments. One of the interesting things about Wisconsin is the Department of Natural Resources, or the DNR. They also have a state scenic trail designation for the North Country Trail, and because of that, they're able to purchase land to help piece together the corridor so that we can get the trail on publicly owned lands. So there's a vast swath of northwest Wisconsin and Douglas County where we know where the trail is going to go. What we don't have currently is the volunteer capacity to get out there and build all that trail and then maintain it once we do build it. So elsewhere on the North Country Trail, we don't know where the trail is going to go, or we don't have permission from the private landowners. So Wisconsin's kind of unique in that, if somebody could snap their fingers and drop a couple $1 million on our plate, we'd be able to complete the trail in Wisconsin pretty quick, which is kind of unique. It's one of the things that we use in the state of Wisconsin to try and engender more support because it has the opportunity to be the first state to be done. So we have 3 chapters in Wisconsin, the Brule St. Croix, which is kind of from the Minnesota border over to County Road A south of Iron River. And then the Chequamegon chapter, which is mostly responsible for the North Country Trail and the Chequamegon National Forest, hence the name. And then the Heritage chapter takes over from Copper Falls State Park and takes the trail over to the Michigan border. So just some pictures across the trail in Wisconsin. We have campsites. Wisconsin has cool waterfalls. It goes through some wilderness areas. I think Derrick helps maintain, I don't think it's the Porcupine. I think it might be the Rainbow Lakes Wilderness where Derrick helps maintain the trail in the wilderness area. So he has to use hand tools. You can see some of our volunteers. Wisconsin is pretty diverse. It's got, lots of pine forest, like in the Brew River State Forest, where, you're walking through red pine plantations. It's got lots of areas where you're going through old growth hardwood trees. And then that picture in the bottom right is kind of one of the unique sections. That's called the Bird Sanctuary, or the Douglas County Wildlife Area, just west of Solon Springs. It's an area that they maintain for sharp-tailed grouse. So it's kind of an open, brushy habitat, and it actually features prairie plants. So it's a beautiful hike in the fall, but it's that rare opportunity to see the fall colors. You have to look down at your feet as opposed to looking up at the canopy of the hardwood trees. So lots of beautiful, beautiful scenery. In that picture, on the top row, second left, that's the tallest waterfall in the state of Wisconsin, which is just off the North Country Trail in Pattison State Park. So some of the projects that we have going on, the Brule St. Croix chapter is kind of waiting on final approval to build a new 7-mile section in northwestern Wisconsin, kind of west of Pattison State Park. We hope that we'll be able to start construction this fall, and it's going to kind of, the Superior Hiking Trail ends at the Minnesota border, and then there's, I think, a couple miles of trail, and then it's kind of this long road walk. So the chapter is going to be adding. So if you're interested in doing a long distance hike on the Superior Hiking Trail, when you get to the Wisconsin border, you can keep hiking, and we're going to keep making that trail longer and longer. So that's kind of cool. One of the other ones, number 2, the Wisconsin DNR. It's been kind of a long process. I think they've been working on it for maybe 5 years, but they're finally have a contractor who's going to be starting to build a footbridge over the Tyler Forks River east of Copper Falls State Park. And currently, right now, that section is a river ford. Most of the year, particularly late in the summer, the water might be thigh deep, but in the spring, you don't want to try and ford the river. So there's kind of a road walk around it. So that'll be nice to eliminate that ford and have a nice pedestrian bridge. And then similarly, in that same area, the Heritage chapter in our Wisconsin Rovers Trail Crew is going to be finishing up a big project I think they've been working on for the last 2 years. It's going to open a new section of the trail that I think is about 7 miles, and it has a couple waterfalls along it on the Potato River that prior to the North Country Trail being constructed, you couldn't get to all of those waterfalls without bushwhacking. So that's one of the goals with our trail, is to try and provide non-motorized foot access to some of these beautiful places that the public, not everybody in the public can get to. Not everybody's comfortable with bushwhacking. And then that last point, we're pretty excited. There's a couple big land acquisition projects that we hope aren't going to get messed up by the shenanigans going on in Washington. And that's going to be some significant additions to the trail. So stay tuned, and we hope to be getting the word out about those successes. If anybody has any questions, feel free to just unmute and shout them out. Derrick, do you want to jump in and take over Minnesota?
Yeah, I probably can't do nearly as well as you can. At least I can get us started. Uh, Minnesota uh, starts at the border down in Jay Cooke State Park, and then uses the Superior Hiking Trail to get all the way up to the north east corner of Minnesota, where it joins up with the border route. And I know there's a couple of trips that I saw tonight that are advertised that the rovers are going to be helping to clear the border route. Uh, some of these trips are wilderness, which means it's all hand tools, and some of them are mechanized. And I would encourage anybody who's interested in seeing what the trail is all about to get involved with the trail crew, because you get people who are really experienced on the trail teaching you where the trail goes, and you get a hand in, well, get your foot into the mud and to actually preserve the trail. Uh, there was a huge tornado, what was it, 2 years ago, Matt, that knocked down a lot of trees and was recently featured in the North Star, the magazine of the North Country Trail. And Matt, in cooperation with another volunteer and a couple Forest Service employees, spent, what was it, 5 days in the wilderness with crosscut saws going through uh, this huge blowdown. Uh, Last year, about this time of year, we were up on the Keck Trail, and we actually built a new section of trail. And this section of trail started from Magnetic Rock, which is the end of the border route, and cut across to the Keck Trail. And the thing that was neat about this is, prior to that, you had to walk 4/10 of a mile on the Gunflint Trail to get from the border out to the Keck. And like Matt says, road walks, they can be efficient, but they're not really the best hiking experience. And in this case, you got all these canoers who are zipping by you at 55 miles an hour, not necessarily interested in hikers along the road, but more in getting back into Ely or back into Grand Marais to get a pizza at Sven and Oli's. So that was only one of the sections of trail that we built. We worked with the Forest Service and actually ended up building about a mile of trail on the Keck, and most of it was relocation of trail. And this was due to I don't know what it is that the Keck was a fire access trail, so it went through the easiest place to go get from one point to the other, went along the side of lakes, and while these lakes fluctuate, the beaver get healthy and the water goes up, the trail goes under. And so we had a Conservation Corps crew that worked with us, and we spent a week relocating the Keck Trail along by Seahorse Lake. And now, rather than walking through Seahorse Lake, you get to go up on the cliffs above it and look over it. And I have to say, by the way, if you want to see cliffs that look over lakes, you better hike the border route, because they've got a whole lot more overlooks on it than any place per mile that I've seen. This year, well, actually since COVID, during COVID, I started working on a route from Snowbank Lake to Ely. The Keck Trail currently ends on Snowbank Lake, and the North Country Trail follows the Snowbank Lake Road and then the Fernberg Road. Anybody who's driven the Fernberg Road knows it's not a good place to hike. A thru-hiker I talked to said it was kind of like a Frogger. He felt like he was in Frogger, hopping back and forth away from cars. But the really neat thing is, we were able to put together a route through the woods that connected the trail. Well, we got up to Quishway Falls, 14 miles of trail. And the Forest Services, if you've been following the news, they've been putting a NEPA study, National Environmental Protection Act study, together on the Fernburg corridor due to all the dead and dying balsam. So they're worried about fire there. Well, they happen to put our trail in there too. So our trail is right in the final stages of getting NEPA approval, meaning hopefully this fall we can actually start building some of this trail. But not to let things lie, we're actually still flagging more trail up there where we were getting the trail off of the Snowbank Lake Road into the woods too, so around Discovery Lake. Ely. Ely is one of these towns that everybody knows it as canoe town. They are now what's called a trail town. And these are some cities along the North Country Trail that really symbolize what the trail is all about. That you come to these trails and it's got all the things you need to stay overnight, to resupply, and just feels like part of the trail. There's a brand new chapter in Ely that is really active, and they're flagging trail from the Ely area, and they actually from Coshway Falls on the Fernburg, and then they're going south all the way. I'm not quite sure where they end, Matt. Is it Vermilion State Park?
Bearhead Lake.
Bearhead Lake.
Yep.
So that's the Ely Northwoods chapter, a very active group, and it's people who live in and around Ely. Couple Forest Service employees that, oh no, that's actually the next one. The Arrowhead chapter has some Forest Service employees that are working with them. Or is that maybe a affiliate, but they're working around Tower to incorporate these ski trails to convert them to all season use and make them part of the North Country Trail. And the North Country Trail is for hiking in compatible winter uses. So that means absolutely no motors, primarily hiking. And there are some bike trails that are being used as hiking trails. These can be permitted, but we really like the Spear Hiking Trail. They're trying to get separate trails for these right now. So I think now I got to give it over to you, Matt, because I really can't describe these trails farther west in Minnesota.
No, that's fine. One other thing, Derrick mentioned trail towns. Just today, I saw an email. Our Arrowhead chapter turned in an application for the cities of Cohasset and Grand Rapids to become trail towns. So like Derrick said, those are two more communities that embrace the fact that the nation's longest hiking trail comes through their community. And they both support the trail, and we're really excited about making that official. So if anybody finds their way up to either Cohasset or Grand Rapids, when you drive into town, you'll soon see a trail town sign, and you might even see blue blazes along the sidewalks through those two cities. So it's pretty neat. So yeah, Minnesota's got quite a few more miles than Wisconsin, about 875. That's probably a lowball estimate, but it crosses 11 counties, crosses 3 of the state's main biomes, with far western Minnesota, the prairie represented, and then kind of the hardwood hills over here by Detroit Lakes and Frazee, where I live. And then most of the trail is quintessential Northwoods, where you see the pines and the spruce and the fir and the aspen and the birch. So it provides some of the quintessential North Country hiking experiences along all of our 8 states. A lot of people from other states say that when they think of true North Country, they're thinking of northern Minnesota. So but it also has, we go through big cities like Duluth on the Spear Hiking Trail, which has got about 40 miles of the trail. Grand Rapids, there's a 10-mile loop within Fergus Falls, which provides some amazing in-town hiking in these big prairie areas. And then also downtown Fergus Falls, where you can stop and get a beer and a pizza, which is kind of nice. And then we also have a long section through the Boundary Waters on the Kekakabic and Border Route trails. So we have 8 chapters in Minnesota. Derrick asked me, about the Brule St. Croix chapter. They maintain, I think it's like 2 or 3 miles right at the Minnesota-Wisconsin border, where the trail, when it leaves the Superior Hiking Trail, crosses into Wisconsin, then crosses back into Minnesota, and then crosses back into Wisconsin. And it was all to go on kind of willing landowners. So I like to say we put in that backwards S curve to slow down all those Superior Hiking Trail runners before they get into Wisconsin and cause all kinds of havoc. And like I mentioned earlier, we also partner with the Border Route Trail Association and Superior Hiking Trail Association, 2 organizations that do a great job managing their sections of the North Country Trail. So just some glimpses. You can see, again, diversity. The top left and then one next to it is kind of the prairie area, which gives you really a glimpse of what it's like to hike in North Dakota, where it's the opposite of most of our states, where you're hiking through the woods and occasionally you get a view. You're hiking in the prairie area, you get a view all the time, and occasionally there's a tree that blocks your view. It's just spectacular. I love hiking in the prairie. We've also got old growth forests like in Itasca, the Chippewa National Forest, and then you can see in the pictures in the bottom, some of our volunteers and the Conservation Corps crews at work, the structures that we build, and then some amazing waterfall scenery. That picture in the lower right is Quishwe Falls up by Ely, which is definitely worth visiting. And we're trying to find a way to make a loop off of the Fernberg Road so that long distance hikers will actually visit the falls instead of saying, nah, I don't want to do it 1 mile out and then back and then continue a road walk. So one of the neat stories that we wanted to share was just, because some of you may remember let's just say 2018 and before that, for at least a decade, we were trying to get Congress to pass legislation that really did what we call the Arrowhead reroute, which if you look at this map, you see this little dashed red line. That was the original route of the trail, goes through the community of Floodwood. So just think about, what kind of mental note does that put in your head when you hear the term Floodwood? Not really the best place for a long distance hiking trail. Would have needed 70 to 80 miles of boardwalk through bogs. Would have cost millions of dollars in lumber. We would have probably had to start our own sawmill just to generate all the lumber to build all the structures to get that trail built. So needless to say, volunteers were not interested. So back in the 1980s, volunteers said, hey, why don't we go up the North Shore and then through the Boundary Waters and then have to build trail between Ely and Grand Rapids. The Park Service studied it starting in the late 1990s. 2004, they said, yeah, that's what we should do. And then for the next 15 years, we tried to get Congress to pass legislation to that effect. Well, in 2019, they finally did. So we all celebrated. And then right after that, we got down to work. But I just wanted to take this opportunity to acknowledge the role that the Rovers, and specifically the Border Route Trail Association, which spun off from the Rovers, without your tireless work on building and then maintaining the Border Route Trail, the Arrowhead reroute would not have been possible. So thank you for all of your decades of, hard work and advocacy and, going up there and building that beautiful trail. Like Derrick said, if you just look at that picture in the middle, that's why you hike the Border Route Trail. You kind of look at, canoeing up there is fine, but boy, when you can get up high above the landscape, it really makes it makes you appreciate that landscape even more, because it's just as much water as it is land, and it's hard to see that when you're a foot above the water. So getting to those high points is really remarkable. So kudos to the BRTA and the Rovers for all your years and effort. Oh, I think I skipped one. So like Derrick said, we're 6 years after, and we're finally, making progress with getting that big gap. If you look at that red corridor on the map there, that's where the North Country Trail is going to go. Fortunately, between Grand Rapids and Ely, we have an alternative route that long distance hikers can use, the Mesabi Bike Trail, which goes through the Mesabi Iron Range, goes through all those communities. You get to see some amazing holes in the ground. But that's not where we want the long distance hiking trail. We want to build dirt trail kind of in the woods away from the big holes in the ground. So we're trying to figure out how to close that big gap, which is probably about 150 miles. And we're literally starting with, starting at zero in a lot of these places. So like Derrick said, he led an effort to flag a new trail between Glippy Road and Fernberg. Hopefully this fall we'll get approval and we can get out there and start construction. But 2026 is probably going to be the big effort. Like Derrick said, the Ely chapter, they've flagged or have started to flag a route between Ely and Bearhead Lake State Park, which is, it's not in the wilderness, but it kind of has a wilderness feel. Very remote, few, roads that people can drive highway vehicles on. If you get a mutter truck, you can get back there quite a ways. But so it's going to be some neat hiking. One of the things that's really missing in the Ely area is hiking opportunities. So the city of Ely and local communities are excited to have the North Country Trail coming through and to have these connections. And who wouldn't want to hike from, Ely to Bearhead Lake, which some of you may remember, was like a decade ago, was voted America's favorite park, more than Yellowstone, Yosemite, Bearhead Lake. And it was all because somebody had a webcam and a bear den. And so yeah, kind of a neat place to visit. So hopefully we'll get that new trail flagged, and then it'll be a couple years for all of the approvals to be granted, and then hopefully in 2027 we'll start building that trail between Ely and Bearhead Lake. So a couple more further to the southwest near Grand Rapids, the Star of the North chapter. Just today I saw the Forest Service, the Chippewa National Forest. They have a project out to build 10 miles of new trail. They're asking the public for input. So if anybody wants to, put their 2 cents in, you can go on the Chippewa National Forest website and look for projects. And they're just basically looking for, what does the public think of this idea? And hopefully everybody here would think that's a good idea to have, an off-road trail rather than hiking on Highway 6, which is a very dangerous road walk. So yeah, hopefully in later this year and certainly into 2026, we'll be building that 10 miles. And then the Arrowhead chapter, based in Grand Rapids, has a large project, 18 miles between Highway 6 and Tioga Beach. So that Chippewa National Forest project is going to end at Highway 6, and then the Arrowhead chapter is going to continue from Highway 6 east up to Tioga Beach and Cohasset. The chapter's already built about 4 miles. Right now, we're unfortunately kind of slowed down. The project's on hold. It's going through a big environmental review to kind of satisfy the state's requirements. The federal government did its process, but the state's saying, nope, you guys need to follow our rules. So construction's kind of a little bit on hold there, but hopefully late this year, we'll be able to start up with construction again and get some Conservation Corps crews out there to help, because really building trail is kind of a young person's game. When you get to be 50 and up, you can build trail for a day, but after that, you kind of realize, man, my muscles are really sore. So we like to hire those young folks like 18 to 25 because they can go out there and do it for 40 hours in a week and still go home at night and not need tons of Advil and ice. And then if you remember, we had work up in Ely and work down by Grand Rapids. It's really kind of the middle area where we don't really know what's going to happen yet. And it's because we don't have a very detailed route plan, and we don't have very many volunteers. So if anybody here has friends or enemies or long lost relatives or just people you've heard about, let them know about the North Country Trail, because we need some folks to help put a line on the map and then build the trail. And we need that local input because, the locals know that landscape the best. And so that's kind of how our trail really gets developed, is using that local knowledge and experience. So we're hoping that the Park Service will do some route planning in that area. Unfortunately, they lost their route planner during the kind of the Doge efforts. And then she came back, but I don't know how long she's going to be around. And she's the only planner on the whole Park Service staff for 8 states and 4,800 miles. So we're hoping that we can get some help to figure out where the trail can go. Because really you can't recruit volunteers if you don't know where the trail is going to go, because that's the first question they say is, yeah, I'm interested. Where's this trail going to go? So it's kind of a 2-pronged attack for that one. So I'll just close with, if you want to get involved, if you want to lend a hand, you want to learn more, here's some QR codes. Hopefully they will work. I've seen this a lot lately, but I don't know how well it works, on Zoom versus up on the big screen in a meeting room. But that one on the top is our events calendar, so you can find chapter activities going on in an area where you're looking to learn more about the trail. The bottom right one, we provide free maps for most of the North Country Trail sections like the Superior Hiking Trail and the Border Route Trail, where there's other groups that produce their maps. We don't provide those free maps, but elsewhere you can download the maps for free, either to print out at home or you can download them to your smartphone. And then we are a membership organization, so if you want to join, we certainly welcome new folks to get involved. You can join and be an at-large member, or you can join and be a chapter member for whichever group you want. So I think that's it. And that's Derrick sitting right there, lunch on that project that he was talking about, building the new connector between the Border Route Trail and the Keck. So any questions?
Can you describe a little bit how the flagging goes? What information you have, what resources you use while you're out there flagging?
Yeah, great question. So we actually just did some flagging 2 weekends ago up in the Ely area, and we did a little bit of training with the Ely chapter. So basically, we started off with a corridor, which again the Park Service has identified, and then we design a route, a proposed route, and then we share that with the land managers and get kind of their buy-in, and sometimes there's tweaking, and so then we end up eventually with kind of a preferred route. And we will save that as GeoPDF maps, and we'll use it with our smartphone, and we'll go out there and more or less just explore. We're not trying to follow a line because you can't see everything when you're designing a trail on the computer. But when you get out there, you have that line to kind of help you stay on the right ownership to avoid, major wetlands. But it's kind of an opportunity to explore. And I like to do it in groups so that you can say, hey, okay, guys, looks like from here, we've got a couple options. Why don't some of you go off to the left and explore, go see what's on the backside of that wetland. The other group go off to the right. And then you come back and everybody reports back. And then we make a decision as a group. Let's go to the right because we think that's going to be a more scenic, more enjoyable recreational experience. So it's kind of like a scavenger hunt and a beautiful bushwhack through the woods, and you're basically putting a long skinny national park out on the ground, which is kind of a cool feature. I mean, this trail is going to be here for generations of folks to use, and our volunteers are getting in on that ground floor. And we just tie plastic flagging tape to tree branches, and then we GPS it on the way back. And then after that, we share it with the land managers again to kind of get their blessing. And then we turn it over to whoever is going to do the compliance, whether that's the Forest Service or the National Park Service. Yeah, and it's a pretty fun, and the best part is if you're around, like if you and Derrick can probably elaborate on this project, but if you flag the trail later on when you're building it, you actually remember, wow, I remember when we flagged this section. And then when you come back when the trail's done and you hike it, you remember when you flagged it and then when you built it. So it's kind of like coming full circle. Yeah, so it's kind of a really cool opportunity to, like I said, put this national park on the ground and to provide this resource that the public benefits from.
All right, good description. That does sound fun.
It is, yep. Any other questions?
Matt, I have a question for
Yep.
you. If someone wanted to hike, so they're backpacking and they wanted to hike and camp, what
Yep.
kind of camping facilities are there along the way?
Good question. Yeah, I kind of glanced over that. We try to provide, since our trail is for long distance hiking, we do try to provide designated backcountry campsites along the trail. It's not always possible because not every land manager allows dispersed camping or wants designated camping on their lands. But in Minnesota, we're pretty lucky in that, when we talk to these land managers, we tell them, well, this is a backpacking trail. We want to build, backcountry campsites. And, we generally don't ask anything from the land managers other than, using their land. We do all the construction. We, pay for the campsite infrastructure, which is, pretty minimal, fire ring, tent pads, wilderness toilet. So yeah, pretty minimal. Other states, their land managers are less supportive of camping, so long distance hikers have to do a lot more, planning ahead. But here in Minnesota and Wisconsin, we generally have backcountry campsites, 6, 8, 10 miles spaced apart, good reliable water sources. So, and those are all shown on our maps.
I have a question about skiing.
Yep.
Are there sections of the trail that are suitable for skiing?
Yes. Typically in the state parks, the North Country Trail will follow, not all the time, but we do follow quite a few sections that are groomed for cross-country skiing. Other places like Tamarack National Wildlife Refuge, parts of the Chippewa National Forest, the trail is groomed. But for the most part, it's just available it's great for snowshoeing. It's great for ski shoeing, which is a perfect opportunity to get out onto the trail in the winter when we have snow. The last couple winters haven't been the best. But yeah, ski shoeing is kind of like backcountry, cross-country skiing. It's fantastic for that. Generally speaking, except for like Superior Hiking Trail and the Border Route Trail and maybe parts of the Keck, the landscape is pretty gentle, so it lends itself to, good opportunities for skiing. But yeah, you could probably pick any section of the trail in the Minnesota, and you go out there in the winter and you're going to have the trail to yourself because it really cuts down on the use of quite a bit.
David, one of the things that you should remember is that particularly the eastern end from McFarland Lake to the junction of the Superior Hiking Trail was designed to cross-country skiing standards way back 45 years ago. And the same on the western end of the Border Route Trail, basically from Bridal Falls all the way across to the Gunflint Trail Road, was actually the first real ski trail built in the Gunflint Lake area. And particularly Gunflint Lodge looked at people coming up and wanting to ski that trail, and they wanted more loops and they wanted to be closer to the lodge and things. And they built their system off of the Border Route Trail back 50 years ago when we first pioneered the whole notion of wilderness skiing up there with the construction of the Border Route. And that, of course, was done by you, the Rovers. And we have trips going up in May to both ends that'll be doing maintenance in those areas. And if you can backpack it, you can come and help us do maintenance. And we really need you. And Matt, I'd really like to thank you for the years of it's got to be incredible headache to wrangle, all the different groups you do across North Dakota, Minnesota, and Wisconsin. And you manage to keep it all together like it's easy. But thank you so much. You've been a great help for us over time.
My pleasure, Gary. You guys are fantastic to work with, and that's my favorite part of the work that I do is getting to work with amazing volunteers, folks like Derrick and you, Gary, Pam. There's folks that have dedicated, decades of their lives, have donated thousands of hours, and it's really a fantastic community to be a part of, one that, everybody is united by the trail. They might come from completely different backgrounds, but when they get out there on the trail, everybody's kind of pulling in the same direction. And yeah, it's just an amazing community to be a part of, kind of like, what I've heard of the Rovers. So it's really neat to find, people with similar outdoor passions and to get to work alongside of them. Any other questions?
early in the presentation, I saw a mention of the Wisconsin Rovers, which I was unaware of. What can you tell me about them? Are they new?
No, they've been around for quite a while. That's our flagship trail crew program for the North Country Trail Association. It's been around for probably 25 years. There was a guy named Bill Menke who used to be the trail manager for the National Park Service, and he did a lot of work because his office was in Madison, in northern Wisconsin, trying to figure out where the trail was going to go. And then he realized that the volunteers had a tough time, building all these miles of new trail, kind of like one day at a time. So Bill started this volunteer trail crew program called the Wisconsin Roving Trail Crew, or the Rovers. Um, and they work on one project, 1 week long project a month between May and November. So 1 week a month, they're out there. They usually show up on Monday. They work Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, and then they break camp on Friday. They camp together. The Rovers provide food, the free camping. They've got this elaborate kind of setup. The first night you're eating steaks, grilled on the grill over the fire, and they've got a tarp set up, and there's camp chairs. It's kind of an amazing experience, and they build amazing trail, amazing bridges. Some of the pictures I showed from Wisconsin were bridges that they built. Just complete crafts people out there building trail. So yeah, if anybody wants more information, all of their crew weeks are on our event calendar. There's kind of a cluster in northeastern Wisconsin, and so if you put your cursor over it, kind of this little spider thing comes up and you see the dates. They're always looking for new folks. Like I said, it's a great experience. You can show up for a day, or you can show up for, 4 days, all of the months that they go out, whatever fits in your calendar. And they've got people from the Twin Cities, people from Wisconsin, people from the UP of Michigan, people from Madison and Milwaukee that drive up. So it's really a great kind of hodgepodge of volunteers from all over. And like I said, the thing that unites them is their willingness and passion for getting out there and building trail and structures.
Cool.
Yeah, you guys should have trademarked the name. You could have charged them royalty or something.
We just might.
Yeah.
Are there any last questions for Matt or Derrick while we have them about hiking on the North Country Trail or backpacking it?
I got a question. Hey, Matthew, thanks all for what you've done. I grew up in Reamer at a
Nice.
summer cabin there, and just fell in love with the North Country Trail as I grew up. I wanted to know, is there any chances or opportunities that are going on in that area where I could give back around Reamer?
Yeah, the Star of the North chapter, which is responsible for the North Country Trail from like Longville over to Reamer, and then they'll help build that trail up to the Highway 6 crossing. They actually have a camping work weekend. I believe it's the first weekend in May. They camp at Maple Lake. The Forest Service gives them free camping, and the chapter provides breakfast, and then they have a kind of a group dinner, and they'll go out and they'll cover their 30 miles of the trail section,
Yeah.
clearing blowdowns, clearing brush. Oftentimes they find, timber sales that happened over the winter and kind of reestablishing the trail. And yeah, they're always looking for new folks. It's mostly folks from the Twin Cities. They do have some folks from kind of that Reamer area, but yeah, definitely that'd be a great opportunity.
Yeah, that's great. I've camped on Maple Lake and know
Yep.
it well. So thanks a lot.
Yeah, and if you volunteer in the trail in that area, you might see Bigfoot, because Bigfoot lives in Reamer.
That's true. It's their claim to fame now. A
Yep.
little bit of a little marketing ploy to bring people into a small town of Reamer, 260, I think, population. Thanks.
You bet.
Matt and Derrick, I just wanted to say great presentation, which I knew it would be. And it's good to work with you guys.
Thank you, Pam. Thanks for your leadership of the BRTA.
Thank you so much to Matt and Derrick for your time tonight and all the information. I hope we'll hear about some folks checking out the North Country Trail this summer.
Thanks for watching this Minnesota Rovers presentation. If you want to see more, please click on the link to our channel or the subscribe button below. Thank you.